Welcome to our first webinar of the year. Dara, can you just confirm that you can hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Excellent. So it's terrific to see such great turnout. This webinar is being provided by our fabulous communications chair, Crista Martin, who heads up strategic communications at Harvard Dining and has really been instrumental for those of you who were at the October meeting. You know already a bit about her unique ability to help each of us individually as well as a collaborative really tell the story around the work that we're doing to advance healthier and more sustainable menus. So today she's going to share some tips, some guidelines, and also building a bit more deeply on some of the preliminary work that she shared in October. We've now shared with all of you, hopefully you received the communications toolkit, and that's kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of the materials, some of which are new that we responded to some great ideas that came up in October for individual principal infographics, being able to share some of the member proud member or proud sponsor buttons in email signatures, perhaps on chef coats, things like that. So she's also going to kind of walk you through some of that towards the end. So it's if you weren't there in October, this will be kind of the intro and situate you into the opportunities that we see that each of us has, and for those of you who were, it'll really build on that in much more depth. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Crista, and thank you again so much for putting this together for us.
Absolutely. So I played this strategically right. I don't happen to have a camera on my computer, so you're never going to get to see me. You're only going to get to see my slides, and maybe we'll go take a look at the web for a little bit. But that is far more interesting. So, but at any point, stop me to ask questions, or we can take some of these topics offline. But what I thought I would walk you through is kind of a 101 about telling our story. And for those of you who were there in October, some of this is a rehash of that, but I thought we might be able to get a little bit more in depth in each area. We sort of flew through it in October. We'll dive in pretty deep now about telling our story as a collective for MCURC. Why do we want to tell our story? Because MCURC is a powerful and growing collaborative. The implications of our work are huge if you think about who we're feeding. But I'm also going to say, why do we want to tell our story? So that more people begin to discover us, more people begin to, essentially, we're here to preach the gospel, right? We're here to get other schools on board, even if they never become part of the collaborative. We know this is a movement that is grounded in science and research about how we can improve the food system as a whole. And we just happen to be, as a group, the leadership of that, but we have plenty of friends and colleagues who are interested and who just may not be able to join at this time. So when I talk about us being powerful and that our work has long-term implications, I'm a data nerd, and I ran some numbers about our impact. And we have more than 60 member institutions. But when I did a quick scan, I tabulated of 26 member institutions who had posted their undergraduate enrollment on the website. That represented 436,000 undergraduates across the country. So imagine, if you will, that every undergraduate lives another 50 years. What they are eating with us now informs their food choices for the next 50 years, which means, only half of our member institutions impact 1.6 billion meals. which is staggering to me. So then imagine if every college or university adopted these notions and helped bring to bear a new generation of savvy food, consumers. So another example, in 2017, the average red meat consumption per person in the United States is 56 pounds. Obviously, some people eat more, some people eat less. But if we as a collaborative got 10% reduction, and when I say collaborative, I only still mean those 26 member institutions. If we got our students to eat 5 pounds less of red meat a year, that would be 2.4 million pounds of red meat in 1 year that we could reduce. Now, I use red meat as an example, and that's a value for some schools and not for others. Let me be clear, not everybody wants to focus on that, but that's just a way of encapsulating the opportunity here, and the environmental implications of that. All right. So what's in a communications toolbox? And again, I'm being a little bit basic and sort of ground level, because we may have some communications professionals on the line. We may have some folks who do this as other duties as assigned. Bless your hearts. And so I just want to make sure we're covering all our bases. So in our particular communications toolbox in MCURC, we have the logo and branding that has been developed. We have all the intra-institutional marketing, and I'm talking about sort of talking to our students, faculty, and staff, and the ways that we do that. And then we have external marketing, the kinds of stuff that reaches beyond our university communities. And out into the public, and whether that's the parents, whether that's neighboring communities, that helps them see what we're doing, and in some cases value it, and in other cases learn from it. It really, what MCURC has to do is rely on, in great part, all of us to do the same kind of marketing about MCURC that we would do about our own dining programs on our campus. So it is in many ways, they're putting in our hands telling that story. And that has some responsibility, but it also has some great opportunity to show the variety of interpretations. And I think that's really exciting. So for example, here you can see University of Colorado at Boulder had a play on the dating apps of these times in their swipe right for more flavor, and these are all great MCURC dishes. That's an example. So the logo and branding. This is the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative logo. Just like our logos at our home institutions, this is a brand that we should not mess with. They've provided it to us in a JPEG format. It's nice and clean and square, which lets it fit on lots of places. So just a quick sort of thought about where you might put it. You should, have it on your website as a badge on your website of some kind. Think about putting it in your email signature. Every time you do a sign or another piece of point of sale in your campus, it can go front and center. Put it on your staff uniforms. Get buttons printed and have all your staff wearing it, and that really gets them engaged in helping to share with your students what Menus of Change is, because you know that students will ask about that. Is anybody else using the logo in other ways like that you want to share? Are you all politely on mute so that I can't hear your background noise?
Everyone is on mute, Krista.
Oh, love you.
But they can unmute themselves if they want.
They can unmute themselves. We'll keep that in mind. So we'll come back to that, and maybe we'll ask everyone to unmute and get into a little bit of a dialogue in a little bit, okay? So next, let's talk about intra-institutional marketing. So MCURC, you know, clearly there are lots of folks that you on your campus want to know about your participation in Menus of Change. And there are different ways to go about this. A big one is staff training. Here at Harvard, we had a staff training day where we, it was during spring break, so people were really freed up to come join us and learn about the different principles and really begin to break down the principles and understand what they meant in their different applications. We have residential, retail, and catering operations here, so it was important for people to be able to filter that through different styles of service. And then we put every principle up on the wall, and we invited folks to walk around and share their thoughts about how we are already living the principle, and then how we might live the principle in the future. What are some ideas that we might apply? And then folks shared out their favorites. And ultimately, we documented that and put a great deal of it on our website so that we were essentially tracking our progress. It got the staff deeply engaged in thinking about and being proud of what they already do, because for many of us, this is happening in our operations, and it's a point of pride, the quality and the thoughtfulness that goes into the food. There is self-reporting, such as our website. So on the dining website here at Harvard, we have an entire page devoted to the principles and what we're doing in each area, so that people can come in and have a look and read up. Another big piece of it is making sure your administrators understand, and this is big. Menus of Change takes a little time and takes a little energy and a little effort, and as you move through the different principles, sometimes it means making some hard decisions about what you can and can't do and what's important to your program, and your administration really needs to understand what you are bringing to their student body. So it's very important to be talking with them about what Menus of Change is and how it's informing your menu and the kinds of changes that you are making, whether your students ask for them or not. So to me, Menus of Change is a great opportunity to be proactive rather than reactive. And I don't know about on your campus, but on our campus, we have in the past struggled with students coming to us with an idea and then we have to react to it. Menus of Change allows us to truly have a set of standards through which we can filter virtually everything and quickly make decisions that typically stay ahead of our students, and they find themselves no longer needing to prod us, but needing to keep up with us. And that's really important. Finally, I'd say a huge opportunity is that you can connect with faculty this way. When you talk to them about the research-based work that stands behind MCURC, you can then be a real-world example in their classrooms about how to make change in the world. And we participate in numerous classes on campus where Menus of Change comes up, and where we share with students the work that we are doing, and it makes them proud their dining program, but it also makes faculty really pleased to be able to take it out of the esoteric and theoretical and into the real practical. Okay. External marketing. So this is where it starts to get much more public facing. And external marketing can bleed back into that internal marketing, right? Students are, in some ways, students are internal customers, and in some ways they're external. It depends on what mood they're in on any given day. But at the top of that list is social media, and having a presence on social media in which you are sharing the good work. So on the right, you have a picture there. If my memory serves, oh yeah, I see it. That's Northeastern, and this was on their social media, and they prominently display each of the principals, and then post about them and talk up the food, and and it is really it's food first. The food needs to be beautiful and eye appealing. And a way for students to engage with what you're talking about. But it's on social media. I would invite and ask you all to use the hashtag MCURC. As of today, I think there were 30 posts there. And mine was the most recent. We have lentils.org on our campus right now, and they're working with our chefs on some plant-forward options, some plant proteins. So post what's happening on campus, what's happening in the kitchen, what's happening front of house, and put that hashtag on it. Another external marketing opportunity is if you have some kind of student ambassador program, making sure that they are as informed as your staff about what you're doing so that they can talk with their peers. Here our student ambassador program is called the Food Literacy Project. And we have undergraduates who are in their residential communities talking up what's happening. So that's a great one because when it's peer-to-peer, there's less skepticism. There's certainly some buy-in right there. Then there are the standard operation marketing materials. And every one of us has a different set of these that we can and do deploy. Table tents, napkin inserts, posters, digital displays, videos, point of sale cards. Every little bit of it can have the menus of change message on it. And then finally, I'd add press. And once you begin to look at the data that's coming out of your operation around change and satisfaction and sustainability, and the shifts you're making in your dining program, you have some really powerful stories to tell. And you can tell it to your campus publications. You can tell it to the trade publications. You can share it at conferences. And you can even share it in your local media, by all means. Tell your story. I am gonna underline there, tell your story, because it is very important that you're talking about what's happening on your campus. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but you know, it's important not to tell other people's stories just because we all have different considerations. So I will add that. Let's see. So here are a few examples, and I'm gonna jump into Harvard's website for a second. So I think I mentioned this, but we have a page on our website that is under About HUDs, and it's all about the menus of change. And here we link to the primary website for Menus of Change. We list all of the principles. Can you all, I hope you all can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
And then under each principle, we list some of the ways in which we are embodying those principles. And you will find, if you go through a similar exercise, that you are touching every single principle, because you know, I think we all are in one way or another. This is a good exercise to go through and refresh. So for example, I think I owe this another look to check in about some things. We just, for example, I was just seeing the limit potatoes. We just, for example, made an adjustment to our menu that has cut our servings of potatoes by at least a third. And we need to go tell that story a little bit more. So that's what that is. While we're here, just for kicks, let's do a hashtag search and see what we get. All right. So here you can see Eat Lentils, who is just at UMass Dining, which is fantastic. This is Northeastern, who's talking about MCURC, and there's Tom from Northeastern. Here is my post about the lentil ideation that's happening, and so on. You really get to see the range of what people's doing, the range of what people are doing, and it's a fun set of inspirations for each other, a great source of ideas for how other folks are marketing. So I highly encourage you to post here and share your great ideas, but also see what else is happening. All right. Okay. This is a point of sale sign that we use in our undergraduate dining hall. So we, as we were really trying to roll this out initially with our undergraduates, we made point of sale signs for every principal, and then we walked around the serving area, and over the course of a week we put them up and down with different dishes to highlight some of what was happening. So for example, we put this sign at the grill, and it gave folks some ideas about how to turn what is a very traditionally meat-centric order into a veggie-centric order. So that is one example of some point of sale that we have done. Here is another MCURC hashtag from Instagram. This is a lentil dish we did in the fall. So you get the idea. So let's talk a little bit more about press releases, because this is where Menus of Change and the University Research Collaborative really begins to, this is where we're each telling how this collaborative is influencing our greater population. So if you have not written a press release before, the gist is this. Think about what the most powerful sentence in your story is going to be and find a way to make it first. So in the winter of 2017, Harvard University Dining Services doubled its service of plant-based proteins with the addition of a line of beans, blah, 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 blah. Quantify it. Numbers are powerful. You know, don't bury the lead. Don't say, don't treat it like creative writing. think about sort of a news headline and make that the start of your story. And then you get into the body, the supporting arguments, the greater telling of that story. But it is your story. Tell what's happening on your campus and what works with your students. Because what works at Harvard may not work in San Diego, may not work in Texas, and so on, okay? And no one version is the right version, just that we're all sort of telling our story. Tie back to MCURC and menus of change with the reference to the specific principles. And then we would ask you to end with a paragraph about MCURC and a paragraph about your institution. Again, in press release sort of protocol, the final paragraph is sort of a canned statement that captures the big picture. And here on the screen to the right, you can see the summary paragraph about MCURC. You should also have one for your university. Ours goes something like Harvard University Dining Services was the oldest collegiate food service and serves 5 million meals annually through blah, 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 blah. And that appears everywhere. It's a standard until those numbers change, all right? So that's just some history. You know, I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You know, talk about your campus. If someone comes to you and they are interested in a bigger story, I think that's awesome. And I encourage you to figure out how you might share the story with your neighbors and colleagues and other people doing this great stuff, but make sure you engage, for example, Sophie and the MCURC leadership so that they can help frame it at a larger level, all right? So here in Cambridge, we do a lot with our friends at Tufts and at Boston College and at Northeastern. And we love to share a collective story, but it's really important that I don't ever accidentally speak for them. They should speak for themselves. And when it gets that kind of scope, we just want to make sure somebody else is aware. All right? Might seem obvious to folks, but just I guess a note of caution. So our fabulous MCURC team has made some very easy to use tools. We have high resolution principal infographics. We have logos. We have templates and press release guidelines, and they are all here on this Google Drive that I believe Shannon Munns shared with folks a while back, but they're always good to refresh. And you can see they're in PDF and JPEG format, and there's some guidance for each item's use. All right. And different versions of it depending on, for example, this is the black version you see versus the coloration depends on what your treatment is. Here are media and press release guidelines, and so on, okay? So all that is here for us. And it's the MCURC Communications Toolkit. If you don't have access to that or can't find it, just shoot Shannon or Sophie or myself a message and we'll make sure you get that. All right. So here's where I would love to hear from you all. I'd love to hear what you're working on, where you have gotten traction in telling your story, what questions you have about what's a good thing to do versus, you know, maybe a little riskier. So talk to me. What's happening on your campus? I'll give you a moment to unmute. Tufts, I think I saw you on the line. Can you jump in for us?
Hi, it's Liza.
Hi, Liza.
I'm jumping in, Krista. You got it. I was trying
Thank
to.
you. Way to put you on the spot, right? How are you guys telling the story there?
Well, we're pretty excited. For a while now, we've been looking at ways to tell our story. So I won't lie that, initially it was challenging. We did some cool trainings with our chefs. I've gotten a lot of tips from this presentation, so thank you. We are already in the midst of several things. We have blown up a lot of the high-res signs. We use them and rotate them in our dining centers, on our sustainability boards. I'm sorry I don't have photos. I wasn't prepared. And, and it's your presentation, but we're also, I'm new to this. I've heard bits and pieces, but this is really great. As you mentioned, there are some communications professionals. I am a communications professional for some of you that don't know me. And Krista, I've learned tons in this that I didn't already know. So this is huge. I've even taken some screenshots. We are about to launch a great Menus of Change dinner next Tuesday night that we're calling Eat Healthy Tufts, a focus on flavor. It's all about the Menus of Change principles, plant forward, sustainable, really healthy, flavorful food. We're very excited. The menu's phenomenal. We've created all kinds of signage. Julie Lampy, our nutritional dietitian, has an intern working with her, and she's creating signage all through the event that will talk about benefits of different foods. They're not as clean and clear as your grill sign, but it's a similar principle. A lot more information. So I loved your sign, and I've gotten a lot of ideas about how we can possibly use those that I'll work with Julie on. And I think I'll stop there because I sound too enthusiastic, but we're in the midst of doing some cool stuff. And I want to do more, so I've got a bunch of notes to talk to our director of things we can do. I'd love to launch a page on our site in our About section. That's something I can do right away. Tell our story a bit, tie it into the Menus of Change, really market it a bit more, put the logo on our homepage. So all great things. Thank you.
You bet. I think one of the things that what you said reminds me of is that that MCURC communications toolkit can be a repository for us to share. So, for example, I know our friends at Riverside are very generous and willing to share some of their graphics. I've done plenty of wordsmithing to try to figure out how to communicate this out to others, whether it be administrators on our campus or to try to tell students what we're doing. So, when you're writing a table tent and you have 125 words max to tell a very complicated story, that can be daunting. And I think if we collectively would share some of those things in that MCURC communications toolbox, that would be awesome. And I pledge to do so. So
Krista, it's Liza still, and then I'll stop. But we're also going to be doing table tents. I agree with you that table tents seem primitive, but they're actually very powerful because every time you sit down at a table in a dining center, you tend to look at them, especially if you're by yourself for a moment. Mm-hmm. So we're doing those for the event. I think how I'm seeing it after this meeting that you've run is I'm using our event that we're doing in the dining center as a kickoff to try to roll out more. We've done a few things in the past. I just got the toolkit for the first time last week. So this is great. And for others, if you aren't far along as we weren't, this is going to help us really propel forward.
All right. So what other kinds of things would be helpful in that communications toolkit? Or what has somebody done that really took off in a way that was surprising in a great way? Allison, I'm going to put you on the spot. I see you posting pretty regularly some really awesome stuff. So can I get you to unmute and share how you're tackling this? Oh, shoot. Whoops. Now what have I done? There we go. Who else can share? What are you doing?
This is Danny Armitage at the University of North Texas. So I'm one of the administrators on the campus. I'm Associate Vice President for Student Affairs. We're doing a lot of things with our hydroponic garden, with our vegan dining hall. We're bringing in some of the terminology from the organizations to those locations to help tell the story and tell it in a meaningful way. The other piece of this, just due to the nature of my position, I'm involved in a half a dozen other organizations, and I've been asked if I would be willing to do some sort of a presentation at a NASPA regional regarding some of the unique things that organizations are doing to address the affordability issue. Affordability seems to be on the rise in many campuses across the country. We've got a textbook affordability conference that, while I was there, FYI, they talked a lot about the addition of food pantries and things along those lines. I think New York State has got a bill that they're looking at funding $1 million to food pantries at universities across the state. So I'm wondering if there is something within this communication packet that we could put into play that helps to demonstrate some of the financial affordability issues that may be also a happenstance of the better eating habits, the use of more vegetables and so forth. Does that make sense?
I don't quite know. No, tell me more. So are you talking about, how does that tie back to menus of change? Help me understand.
Well, some of the connections with menus of change in the couple of meetings that I've attended, when you take a look at the sustainability piece, and for example, we brought the hydroponics to North Texas, where we're getting top quality green leafy vegetables at what is ending up being bottom of the rung pricing. So it's actually more affordable, so we're actually able to manage more costs. We're dealing with the fact that a lot of campuses are struggling with the affordability issue of the rising costs of housing, of meal plans, of textbooks, of all the fees associated. So what is Menus of Change doing other than the transferring of, the research that we were doing with the plant-based proteins and mixing them with the animal-based proteins? You should at some point see some also affordability piece of where, from a pricing standpoint, it's more economical. It's also a sustainable practice that we're actually seeing an impact on the long-term implications of our dining habits in the country.
Sure. Okay. So what you said, it finally, forgive me, I was being a little slow there. So I would say essentially what you are talking about, if I'm coming back to sort of a communications messaging, is this is some of that intra-institutional marketing. This is some of the storytelling that you need for talking to your administration about why this is valuable and important, and then ultimately and eventually why it's important to your, the story for your students. So I think people often think of this as a bit of an elite food culture that comes at a hearty price, and that's not at heart true. I think that's a misperception. So is that a fair sort of communications twist on what you're essentially looking for?
Well, I think that it is fair. I would say that while it is something that I'm needing to share with my administration, I will also say that I think if you look at the values and the culture of the student affairs, the student engagement or student development theory basis, you're also looking at saying, how do we make this more affordable for those students who are truly food insecure? They're wondering where they're going to get their next meal, how we can put things into place that might work better or more effectively from a financial standpoint in a low socioeconomic environment that may help provide some other solutions to the fact that our food costs have some inflationary things built in and continue to rise.
Okay. I will be the first to say I don't have a quick answer for that. I think it's I think you raise a compelling point that we can talk about, we can and should talk about how adopting these principles are good for the planet and good for the food system and are targeted to resolve some of those issues. So I totally agree. I think that's an interesting point for continuing to dig into.
Yeah, the Administrative Council has started talking about how you apply this. And when you ask what can be in the communication toolbox, if the organization can roll out where these things can not only be healthier, more sustainable, but also can manage your food costs in a much more effective way, that you don't have to pass that on to your student population.
Yeah, and so
I'm telling that story.
So, for example, I would say to you that is your story. That is your press release where you can, your headline is, it has to do with the fact that your hydroponic garden not only makes for a healthier a healthier meal, but also a more affordable one. And here's how and why. So, I think that's absolutely your story to tell, and that's an awesome one.
Exactly.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. It's been interesting today.
Good. Who else is on the line and is having fun with marketing this in a way that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Hey, Crista, can you hear me now?
I can.
Awesome. Okay, this is Allison Butler from CU Boulder. I was having some mic difficulties trying to figure out how to unmute myself.
You were good. Yes.
I'm so sorry. So we've been doing a plethora of things. We've done a culinary competition where we put our chefs head to head out in the atrium in one of our main dining centers and let them build dishes that celebrated the menus of change. And that was really successful. The students loved kind of seeing our culinarians come out from behind the scenes and, show their stuff and see how those principles were actually incorporated into a dish. And it was a great forum to kind of open up conversation about principles. I think at the beginning, you guys saw some of our Swipe Right for More flavor posters, which were popular too. That was an idea that we came up with a while ago. And then we've been rolling it out in different ways, but really putting a huge focus on like vegetables and whole grains and marketing them as something that was familiar to our students. So they'd take a second look at it and then, just kind of being creative in the way that we were marketing vegetables to them because, vegetables aren't nearly as sexy, I would say, as some, you know, other things that you see out there, like all the marketing for like junk foods and sodas and stuff like that. You know, we do produce weeks where we feature a specific produce item and do it a couple different ways. And then we do veggies for dessert week, which is always a huge hit too. And then we use our social media and marketing team to help us with posters and signage and social media marketing.
Awesome. I love that notion of making vegetables sexy. That's well, and you know, so generationally relevant. I think what's so clever about that is that it's really on point for the generation to whom you are communicating. One of the things that I struggle with as a balance, and I'd love to hear from you all, is that as I'm communicating the principles, they're written for operators. They are written for us as a guidebook for how to do things. That doesn't always translate to a consumer base. Do any of you ever struggle with that when you are marketing, for example, putting the 24 principles poster up in your dining hall? Do students ever look at it and say, well, what does that have to do with me?
I think, like, this is Allison again, I think a lot of them are kind of confused by it, especially because there are so many. So we try to take the approach of, this is what we're doing to implement these into our operations, and this is what you can do to support them in what you're doing. So, for example, when I developed the dietitian's dish icon, which mimics my plate except has my own spin on it, if you look at the details and how we describe how someone should build a plate, it uses word for word some of those principles and tries to encourage them to incorporate them into what they're actually eating, and then showing them how we provide that for them within our dining centers.
Okay. Has anyone ever taken the tack of sort of interpreting, translating the principles into consumer speak? So I'm trying to think of an example of something that we have.
Good afternoon. If I may join, am I unmuted?
No, come on in.
All right. Hi, my name is Jason Andrews. I'm calling from University of California, San Diego.
Good to have you.
We have not been terribly, active with menus of change and utilizing these logos, but your topic about the relatability and interpreting it to consumer speak kind of aligns with a few of the notes that I wanted to share with the team. And that's where we have a couple of different initiatives we're participating with. One is a regional one called Save the Food San Diego, which is a county-wide initiative and has ad council design pieces that we are looking to leverage and get deployed into various areas of our facilities, of our digital signage, even into the residential halls themselves. So that goes into avoiding food waste and how you utilize your leftovers. How do you properly store? How do we as an organization cook a la minute dishes so that we have reduced waste instead of large batch cooking and things of that sort. And I'm looking forward to seeing the effect that has with the student population, because it does kind of frame it into the opportunity shared of this is our role versus this is your role as the student, the consumer, the individual in your own household. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's a nice way of saying it, because there are pieces of menus of change that we alone can control, and then there are pieces of it that our consumers can and do need to adopt in order for us to be successful in making changes. So I think your point is a great one. I think it's go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to share, we've experienced that same issue with the translatability of a different program. It's called REAL, Responsible Epicurean Agricultural and Leadership. And they put together these report cards for all of our operations based off of our procurement data, our recipe data, the nutritional content, awards, and industry participation we have. And that one I was hoping would be more readily understandable, but even the term Epicurean seemed to be that of a foreign nature to a lot of our students and even our staff and faculty that we talk about this certification with. So it's definitely a pragmatic and real challenge that I think we need to address.
And I think finding a way to translate for consumers so that it's actionable doesn't take away at all from what you are doing, because they couldn't make those changes if you weren't providing those foods. So I think I do think as we market, it's important to think about who we're talking to and what we're trying to get them to do. So, what if we serve less red meat less often, then maybe they'll eat less red meat less often, and just sort of being mindful that we do need to translate that way, because what makes sense to us doesn't always make sense to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then going back to the gentleman from Texas who was talking about food insecurity and opportunities to better leverage what we're doing and sharing with that. We have this kind of startup group. It's called the Healthy Campus Network. It's trying to look at health and wellness from multiple angles with subcommittees, where I have the privilege of participating with the Eat Well committee. And one of the nifty things that I didn't even realize, and I'll give you this, I'm an alumni of the institution, but it was the discussion of the community gardens and how we can better leverage those. So we certainly have community gardens dotted throughout our campus, but one of the things that a participant who kind of leads those community gardens from a landscaping role and educating the students on how to grow their own foods and seasonality, etc. One of the things he brought up is the hope and goal to create a foraging website. So basically there's landscape throughout the campus that is edible and can be utilized, and to try to create a map of that, to try to make food and the sustainability element of local food ever present in the students' lifestyle from the get-go. And we're looking forward to seeing how that has an opportunity to improve our initiatives in this sense.
That's fascinating. Here in the Boston
And
area,
that's all I have. It was a pleasure.
in the Boston area, we have a group called the Gleaners, and they go around and gather fruits and vegetables from farms or fruit trees or whoever else, and it's great edible food that people aren't using. You have an apple tree in your backyard and you don't pick all the apples, you can call the Gleaners and they'll gather that, and that's kind of that same foraging element. It's interesting. So, all right, we have just a few more minutes, and I don't want to miss any great sharing or any great questions. And I sure hope that this conversation will continue on the Google Plus community. What other burning topics do any of you have on the notion of communications and marketing and telling your story? What do you need? What resources can we bring out for you? Tell me more.
Crista Dennis from UConn.
Hey there.
Okay, good. I'm having problems of muting and unmuting and anyway. Two quick things. One, are you posting this PowerPoint up on Google Community?
You bet.
Okay, second thing. What we did this semester is we put out we're still sort of old-fashioned in the sense that we put out a booklet every semester that encompasses everything you want to know about dining services. It's called UCuisine. And so it has all the menu cycles in it. It has hours and blah, 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 blah. And on our front page, we put down the graphic with all of the principles. And because of the access that students have to this, I think that helps in the understanding of the movement, where people are now referring to our local paper saying, what are you doing with menus have changed this month? And so the awareness was increased significantly. Inside the magazine, there was a lot of details that we did about the whole collaboration and where we're going with it and what we're trying to do. So that was very helpful.
That's great.
That's all I got.
That's awesome. And that really shows that it's not unlike a mission statement, right? This is the rules for how we run our operation. And that doesn't mean that they're the only rules we use, but it's a very clear set of guiding, it is principles, obviously, for how we're working. And so for students to see that right up front, that's lovely. Anybody else? Questions, resources you need, great ideas you've had?
Crista, this is Sophie.
I just would like to say thank you. It's phenomenal. You guys have really shared a lot.
Gladly. Yes, Sophie.
I just wanted to give a little plug to Rutgers. I was there, Eric Montel and I were there in January, and Chef Ian Keith was the first MCURC member that I've seen to actually put the Proud Member logo on his chef coat. And as I understand it, the whole team was getting those emblazoned. So I thought that was a really interesting kind of morale booster, or just again to the sort of internal what are our guiding values application of some of these materials. The feedback that I received from Ian, and I don't know if he's on here, anyone from Rutgers can certainly speak to this better, but that was for me a really inspiring example where I hadn't even thought of that in producing these materials. And that's what's so, it's to me a lot of the beauty of the collaborative is the way that you guys take all of these materials and really run with them and make them your own.
Fantastic. That is a great idea.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, Sophie. This is Peggy from Rutgers, Peggy Policastro. And yeah, we have a lot of positive feedback from putting that on the chef codes and some of the outfits that the food service workers are wearing. That's just one thing that we did to always remind people that we're part of MCURC, and to have others ask questions about what that means. It's a great talking point.
Fantastic. All right, so I will most definitely post this on the Google community along with my direct contact information, because I am always here and happy to take specific questions or share anything that you have seen from a graphics perspective or from an ideas perspective. And I can't wait to see you and your hashtag on social media.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Crista. This was outstanding. Thank you to Dara for running behind the scenes. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar, which is in the Lunch and Learn, Latte and Learn series. We'll be exploring green buildings and hearing from Paul Houle from CU Boulder, as well as Richard from Fishnick, some real expert in healthy and sustainable design and facilities strategies. So don't miss it, March 8th. And that's at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. And thanks again, everyone. Have a fabulous afternoon, fabulous evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.